The space station called Horizon 7 floated quietly in the darkness between stars. It was a place where many species came to trade, talk, and sometimes hide from their problems. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years, and most aliens still looked at them as children who had just learned to walk among giants. Kong Taeho wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished.
Out repairing a broken power line in the lower decks.
He was 28 years old, with tired eyes and rough hands that told the story of years of hard work. He had no family waiting for him anywhere. The station was his home, and machines were his only friends. Most aliens ignored him when he walked through the corridors. Some looked at him with curiosity, like he was a strange animal in a zoo. Others showed open disgust. Humans were considered primitive by many species. They lived short lives, had weak bodies, and came from a small blue planet that nobody important had ever heard of. Tae-Ho did not care about their opinions. He did his job well, kept his head down, and saved his money for a future he had not yet planned. On this particular day, the station was busier than usual. A Valari diplomatic ship had arrived, carrying important guests. The Valari were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. They were tall, elegant beings with pale blue skin and silver hair. Their empire controlled hundreds of worlds. Their queen was feared by all who knew her name. Taeho had seen Valari officers walking through the upper decks. Their chins held high, their eyes looking through humans as if they were made of glass. He avoided them whenever possible. But fate had other plans. That evening, Taeho was working alone in a restricted engineering bay on Deck 14. It was a quiet area, far from the crowds, filled with old machines and forgotten storage containers. He liked it there because nobody bothered him. He was checking a valve when he heard footsteps behind him. Quick, nervous footsteps that did not belong to any engineer. He turned around and saw a young woman standing near the entrance. She wore simple brown clothes, the kind that workers wore, but something about her seemed wrong. Her skin was pale blue, almost glowing under the dim lights. Her silver hair was hidden under a hood, but a few strands had escaped. Her large violet eyes looked around the room with fear and confusion. She was Valari, and she was clearly lost. Before Taeho could say anything, a loud alarm filled the air. Red lights began flashing on the walls. A cold, mechanical voice announced the problem. Warning: oxygen leak detected in Section 14. Emergency seal required. Taeho's heart jumped. He knew exactly what that meant. The air in this section would disappear in minutes. If the leak was not fixed, anyone inside would suffocate. The young woman did not understand. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with panic. She tried to breathe, but the air was already growing thin. Taeho did not think. He ran to the control panel and began typing commands. The emergency seal was jammed. He would have to close it manually. He looked at the woman. She had fallen to her knees, gasping for breath. Her species was not used to low oxygen environments. She would die before he could fix the problem if he did not act fast. He grabbed a portable oxygen mask from his emergency kit and ran to her. He pressed it against her face and held it there. "Breathe," he said firmly. "Slowly. Do not panic." Her violet eyes met his. There was fear in them, but also something else. Surprise, confusion. Why was this human helping her? Taeho did not wait for her to ask questions. He left her with the mask and ran back to the broken seal. The metal was hot from the pressure buildup. He would have to push it closed with his bare hands. He grabbed the emergency lever and pulled with all his strength. The metal burned his palms. He could feel his skin tearing, but he did not stop. He pulled harder, screaming through his teeth, until finally the seal clicked into place. The alarm stopped. Fresh air began flowing back into the section. Tae-Ho collapsed against the wall, holding his burned hands against his chest. The pain was terrible, but he was alive. And so was she. The young woman removed the oxygen mask and stared at him. Her breathing was still fast, but the color had returned to her face. "You saved me," she whispered. Taeho managed a weak smile. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly. Then her eyes fell on his hands. They were red and blistered, covered in burns that would take weeks to heal. "Your hands," she said, her voice filled with shock. "You are injured." Teho looked at his palms and shrugged. "It is not so bad. The medical bay can fix this." She stood up and walked toward him. Her movements were graceful, like water flowing over stones. She knelt beside him and took his hands gently in hers. "Why did you do this?" she asked. "You do not know me. I am a stranger. Why would you hurt yourself for me?" Teho looked into her violet eyes. They were beautiful, he realized, like two small galaxies filled with stars. "You needed help," he said simply. "That is enough reason." The young woman stared at him for a long moment. In her world, everything had a price. Help was given only when something could be gained. Nobody sacrificed themselves for strangers, especially not for someone from another species. But this human had done exactly that. He had burned his own hands to save her life, and he asked for nothing in return. "I am Lorraine," she said softly. "Teho," he replied. "Kung Teho." She helped him stand, supporting his weight as they walked toward the door. A medical team would arrive soon, alerted by the emergency alarm. "Teho," she repeated as if tasting the name. "I will remember this. I will remember you." He laughed weakly. "I am nobody important, just an engineer." Lorraine shook her head. "No, you are wrong." She looked at him with an expression he could not understand. It was something between gratitude and wonder, as if she had just discovered something precious hidden in an unexpected place. "You are the first person who ever treated me like I was just a person," she said. "Not a title. Not a name." Just me. Teho did not know what she meant by those words. He did not know that she was a princess, the youngest daughter of the most powerful queen in the galaxy. He did not know that this moment would change both of their lives forever. All he knew was that a stranger had needed help, and he had given it. That was enough. The medical team arrived and took Teho away for treatment. Lorraine watched him go, her heart beating in a strange new rhythm. She had come to this station to escape her cage, to taste freedom for just a few days. She had not expected to find anything meaningful. But now, standing alone in that cold engineering bay, she realized something had changed inside her. She wanted to see him again. She needed to understand why a human, a species her people called primitive, had shown more courage and kindness than anyone she had ever known. And deep in her heart, a small fire began to burn. 3 days passed after the accident. Teho's hands were healing well thanks to the station's medical technology. The doctors had wrapped them in special bandages that would repair his burned skin within a week. He returned to work as soon as they allowed him, because sitting alone in his small room made him think too much. He thought about the strange woman with violet eyes. Lorraine, he wondered who she really was. She had spoken like someone important, someone who carried heavy burdens. But she had also seemed lonely, like a bird trapped in a cage made of gold. He did not expect to see her again. People like her did not visit places like Deck 14. Their worlds were too different. But he was wrong. On the 4th day, Lorraine appeared at the entrance of his engineering bay. She wore the same simple clothes as before, her silver hair hidden under a dark hood. She carried a small bag in her hands. Teho stopped working and stared at her. "You came back. I wanted to see how you were healing," she said. Her voice was soft, almost shy. "And I brought you something." She opened the bag and pulled out a container filled with strange purple fruits. They looked like small, glowing jewels. "These are from my homeworld," she explained. "They help with pain and speed up healing. I thought they might help your hands." Teho took the container carefully. Nobody had ever given him a gift before. He did not know what to say. "Thank you," he managed. "You did not have to do this." "I wanted to," Lorraine said. She looked around the engineering bay with curiosity. "Is this where you work every day?" He nodded. "It is not much, but I like it here. It is quiet. The machines do not judge me." Lorraine smiled at that. It was a small smile, but it lit up her entire face. "I understand that feeling. Sometimes I wish I could hide among machines too." She did not leave after that. She sat on an old storage container and watched Teho work. She asked questions about the machines, about his life, about Earth. He answered them as best as he could, surprised by her genuine interest. Most aliens never asked humans anything. They assumed they already knew everything worth knowing about such a young species. But Lorraine was different. She listened carefully to every word as if she was collecting treasures. "Tell me about your planet," she said. "What is it like?" Teo stopped working and leaned against the wall. He thought about Earth, a place he had not visited in many years. "It is beautiful," he said slowly. "Blue oceans, green forests, mountains that touch the clouds. We have seasons that change the colors of the trees. In spring, flowers bloom everywhere. In winter, snow covers the land like a white blanket." Lee closed her eyes, trying to imagine it. "It sounds wonderful." "It is," Tejo agreed. "But it is also hard. Humans fight a lot. We hurt each other. We make mistakes. But we also love deeply. We feel everything so strongly that sometimes it breaks us." "That sounds painful," Lorraine whispered. "It is," Tejo admitted. "But it is also what makes us strong. We break, but we rebuild. We fall, but we stand up again. Our lives are short, so we try to fill them with meaning." Lee opened her eyes and looked at him with an expression he could not read. "My people live for hundreds of years. We are taught to control our emotions, to hide them behind masks of dignity. Showing feelings is considered weakness." "That sounds lonely," Tejo said. "It is," she admitted. "Very lonely." After that day, Lee returned again and again. Sometimes she stayed for hours, talking with Tejo about everything and nothing. He showed her human music, playing old Korean songs from a device he kept in his pocket. She had never heard anything like it. "Why does this music make my chest hurt?" she asked one evening, her hand pressed against her heart. "Because it is meant to," Tejo explained. "This song is about a man who lost the woman he loved. He sings about his pain so that others can share it with him. That is how humans deal with sadness. We do not hide it. We sing it, write it, paint it. We turn our pain into art, so we are not alone in it." Lee wiped a tear from her cheek. She had not even realized she was crying. "Your species is strange," she said softly, "but also beautiful." Tejo laughed. "We are a mess, but we are an honest mess." As the weeks passed, their friendship grew deeper. Lee told Tejo about her life as a princess, about the expectations that crushed her like heavy stones. She was supposed to marry a noble from a powerful family to strengthen political alliances. She was supposed to be perfect, silent, obedient, but she did not want any of those things. "I want to be free," she confessed one night, her voice breaking. "I want to choose my own path, my own future. But every door is locked." Tejo took her hand gently. His palms were still rough from work, but his touch was warm. "Then we will find a window," he said simply. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Why are you so kind to me?" "I am nothing special." "You are wrong," Tejo said firmly. "You are brave. You came to this station alone, searching for freedom. You talk to a human engineer when everyone tells you we are beneath you. You cry at sad songs and ask questions nobody else asks. Lee, you are the most special person I have ever met." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, without thinking, she leaned forward and pressed her lips against his. The kiss was soft and quick, like the first drop of rain before a storm. Tejo froze, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "I am sorry," Lee whispered, pulling back. "I should not have done that. I know this is impossible. Our worlds are too different. My mother would never allow this. I am a princess, and you are a nobody," Tejo finished. "No," Lee said fiercely. "You are everything. That is the problem." Tejo looked into her violet eyes. He saw fear there, but also hope. A desperate, fragile hope that scared him because he felt it too. He took her face in his rough hands and kissed her back. "I do not care about your mother," he said against her lips. "I do not care about your empire or your titles. I care about you. Just you, the consequences," Lee breathed. "They will be terrible, then let them come," Tejo replied. "I have faced worse than angry queens." She laughed through her tears. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. They sat together in the quiet engineering bay, holding hands under the dim lights. Outside, stars burned in the endless darkness of space. Somewhere far away, thrones and politics and ancient laws waited to tear them apart. But in that moment, none of it mattered. They had found each other against all odds. A human engineer and an alien princess. Two souls from different worlds, connected by something stronger than tradition. And neither of them was willing to let go, Commander. Doric had served the Valari Empire for over 200 years. He was a tall, stern man with cold gray eyes and a face that never smiled. His loyalty to Queen Mavera was absolute. He would burn worlds if she commanded it. When the princess disappeared from her quarters for the first time, Doric assumed she was simply exploring the station. Young royals sometimes grew curious about foreign places. It was annoying but harmless. But when Lorraine continued disappearing day after day, always for hours at a time, Doric became suspicious. A princess did not wander alone without reason. Something was wrong. He assigned 2 of his best soldiers to follow her secretly. What they reported back made his blood boil with disgust. The princess was spending her time with a human. Not just any human, but a common engineer from the lowest decks. They talked, laughed, and held hands like lovers. The soldiers even witnessed them kissing. Doric crushed the report in his fist. This was not just improper, this was treason. The royal bloodline of the Valari Empire could not be contaminated by primitive species. The very thought made him sick. He contacted Queen Mavera immediately. The queen's holographic image appeared before him, towering and magnificent. Her silver hair was arranged in an elaborate crown, and her violet eyes burned with ancient power. She was over 500 years old, and every year had made her harder, colder, more absolute in her authority. "Speak," she commanded. Doric bowed his head. "Your Majesty, I bring grave news. Princess Li Ray has been engaging in a romantic relationship with a human male." Silence filled the room. When the queen spoke again, her voice was like ice cracking. "Repeat what you just said, human, Your Majesty. A common engineer on this station?" They had been meeting secretly for weeks. The queen's expression did not change, but Doric could feel her rage radiating through the hologram like heat from a dying star. "Arrest the human," she ordered. "Bring my daughter back to the ship. I will deal with this matter personally." Doric smiled for the first time in years. "With pleasure, Your Majesty." That night, Tejo was working late in the engineering bay. Lorraine had left an hour earlier, promising to return the next day. He was still smiling from their last conversation when the door burst open. 6 Valari soldiers marched in, their weapons raised. Behind them stood Commander Doric, his gray eyes filled with hatred. "Kong Tejo," Doric announced, "you are under arrest for crimes against the Valari throne. You will come with us." Tejo's smile disappeared. His heart began pounding as fear flooded his body. "What crimes? I have done nothing wrong." Doric walked closer until his face was inches from Tejo's. "You touched a princess. You contaminated royal blood with your primitive hands. That alone deserves death." Before Tejo could respond, 2 soldiers grabbed his arms and forced them behind his back. Cold metal chains wrapped around his wrists, burning his skin with energy. "Where are you taking me?" Tejo demanded. "To the flagship," Doric replied, "where you will face justice from the queen herself." Tejo's blood went cold. He had heard stories about Queen Mavera. She was not known for mercy. People who angered her did not survive to tell their stories. But his fear was not for himself. It was for Lorraine. What will happen to her? He asked desperately. "The princess. What will you do to her?" Doric laughed. It was an ugly sound, like bones breaking. "The princess will be punished for her foolishness. But she is royal blood. She will survive. You, however, will not." The soldiers dragged Tejo through the corridors of the station. Other species watched him pass with indifferent eyes. A human being taken away by Valari soldiers was not unusual. Nobody cared enough to ask questions when they reached the Valari flagship. Teho was thrown into a small prison cell deep inside the ship. The walls were made of cold black metal, and there were no windows. Only a single dim light flickered above his head. He sat on the hard floor and thought about Ray. He wondered if she knew what had happened. He wondered if she was scared. He wondered if he would ever see her again. Hours passed. Then days. Teho lost track of time in the darkness. Finally, the door opened. A guard threw a piece of bread and a cup of water at his feet. "The Queen has scheduled your trial for tomorrow," the guard announced. "Enjoy your last meal, human." The door closed again, leaving Teho alone with his thoughts. Meanwhile, on another part of the ship, Lorraine was facing her own nightmare. She had been captured the moment she returned to her quarters. Guards surrounded her before she could even scream. They took her to a private chamber and locked her inside. For 2 days, nobody spoke to her. She pounded on the doors, screamed for answers, but received only silence. On the 3rd day, a holographic screen activated on the wall. Her mother's face appeared larger than life and twice as terrifying. Mother Lire gasped. "Please, let me explain." "There is nothing to explain," Queen Mavera said coldly. "You have disgraced our family. You have shamed our bloodline. A human Lire. Of all the species in the galaxy, you chose a human." "He saved my life," Lire pleaded. "He is kind and brave and good. He is better than any noble you have ever introduced me to." "Enough." The Queen's voice thundered through the room. "I will not hear you defend this creature. He will be executed tomorrow for his crimes against the throne." Lire's heart stopped. "Executed?" "No, Mother. Please. He did nothing wrong. I was the one who pursued him. I was the one who kissed him first. Punish me if you must, but do not kill an innocent man." "He is not innocent," the Queen replied. "He touched you. That alone is a death sentence." Tears streamed down Lire's face. "I love him." The Queen's expression flickered with something that might have been pain, but it disappeared quickly, replaced by cold determination. "Love is weakness," she said. "You will watch his execution. Then you will return home and marry whoever I choose for you. This foolishness ends now." The screen went dark. Lire collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She had never felt so helpless in her entire life. The man she loved was going to die, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Or was there? She wiped her tears and forced herself to think. There had to be a way. There had to be something she could use. Some law or tradition that could save him. Then she remembered. The right of declaration. An ancient Valari law that allowed any royal to make one public statement before the entire court, a statement that could not be interrupted or denied. It was originally created to protect royals from being silenced by their enemies. Lire had never used it before. Nobody had used it in centuries, but the law still existed. And the Queen was bound by tradition to honor it. A desperate plan formed in Lire's mind. It was dangerous. It was possibly insane. But it was the only chance she had. She stood up and straightened her shoulders. Tomorrow, she would face the court. Tomorrow, she would speak. And tomorrow, everything would change. The Grand Court of the Valari flagship was the most magnificent room Teho had ever seen. Tall pillars of white crystal rose toward a ceiling painted with scenes of ancient victories. Thousands of lights floated in the air like captured stars. The floor was polished so perfectly that it reflected everything like a mirror. But Teho could not appreciate any of this beauty. He was on his knees, his hands bound by glowing chains, surrounded by guards who would kill him the moment the Queen gave the order. The court was filled with people. Valari nobles in expensive clothes whispered behind their hands. Military officers stood at attention along the walls. Ambassadors from other species watched from special balconies, curious to see how the mighty Valari Empire punished those who dared to offend them. At the far end of the room, on a throne made of pure crystal, sat Queen Mavara. Her silver crown glittered under the lights, and her violet eyes stared at Teho with absolute disgust. "Bring forward the prisoner," she commanded. Two guards grabbed Teho and dragged him closer to the throne. They forced him to kneel again, this time only a few meters from the queen herself. "Kong Teho of Earth," the queen announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You stand accused of crimes against the Valari throne. You have touched a member of the royal family. You have contaminated our sacred bloodline with your primitive presence. How do you answer these charges?" Teho lifted his head and looked directly at the queen. Fear was screaming inside him, but he refused to show it. "I answer that I have done nothing wrong," he said clearly. "I helped someone who was in danger. I cared for someone who was lonely. If loving your daughter is a crime, then yes, I am guilty." Gasps filled the court. Nobody had ever spoken to the queen with such boldness. Commander Doric stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "His human dares to insult Her Majesty," he snarled. "Let me remove his tongue." "Silence," the queen ordered. Her eyes never left Teho's face. "You are either very brave or very stupid, human." "Perhaps both," Teho replied. For a moment something flickered in the queen's expression. Surprise, maybe. Or curiosity. But it disappeared quickly. "Regardless of your words, the law is clear. You will be executed for your crimes. The sentence will be carried out immediately after this trial concludes." Teho closed his eyes. He had known this was coming. He had accepted it during those long days in the prison cell. If his death was the price for loving Lorraine, then he would pay it without regret. But then he heard a voice that made his heart stop. "I invoke the right of declaration." Everyone in the court turned toward the entrance. Standing there, dressed in a simple white gown, was Princess Lirae. Her silver hair flowed freely over her shoulders. Her violet eyes burned with determination. Queen Mavara's face turned pale. "Lirae, what are you doing?" Lirae walked forward, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She passed the nobles, the officers, the ambassadors. She did not look at any of them. Her eyes were fixed on her mother. "I invoke the right of declaration," she repeated. "By the ancient laws of our ancestors, I claim the right to make one public statement before this court. A statement that cannot be interrupted, denied, or punished." The queen gripped the arms of her throne. "This law has not been used in 500 years. But it still exists," Lirae replied, "and you are bound by tradition to honor it." Murmurs spread through the court. The ambassadors leaned forward with interest. This was not something they had expected to witness. Queen Mavara's jaw tightened. She was trapped by her own laws. If she refused her daughter's request, she would appear weak before the entire galaxy. She would prove that Valari traditions meant nothing. "Very well," she said through clenched teeth. "Speak your declaration, daughter, and then we will end this foolishness." Lirae stopped walking. She stood in the center of the court, between her mother's throne and the man she loved. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Then she spoke.
I stand before this court.
"Before my mother? Before the representatives of 100 worlds? To make a declaration that cannot be undone." She turned to look at Teho. His eyes were wide with confusion and hope. "This man," she continued, pointing at him, "is not my captor. He is not my corrupter. He did not seduce me or trick me or force me into anything." She walked toward him and stood by his side. "By the sacred laws of our ancestors, I invoke the bond of eternal union." The court exploded with shocked voices. Nobles jumped to their feet. Officers shouted in disbelief. Even the ambassadors could not hide their amazement. Queen Mavara stood from her throne. "You would not dare." Lirae lifted her chin and spoke the words that would change everything. "This man, Kong Teho of Earth, is my spouse." Silence. Complete and absolute silence. The bond of eternal union was the most sacred tradition in Valari culture. It was a declaration of marriage that could not be broken by any power in the universe. Once spoken before witnesses, it bound two souls together forever. Even the queen herself could not undo it. The law had been created centuries ago to protect royal marriages from political interference. It was meant to ensure that true love could never be torn apart by scheming enemies. Lirae had turned this ancient protection into a weapon. "He is my spouse," she said again, louder this time. "And by our own laws, You cannot execute the husband of a princess. Queen Mavara's face twisted with rage and shock. Her daughter had outmaneuvered her using traditions that the queen herself had sworn to uphold. "You foolish child," she hissed. "Do you understand what you have done? You have bound yourself to a human, a creature that will age and die while you remain young, a primitive animal with no status, no power, no future." Ray did not flinch. "He has something that none of your chosen nobles ever had. He has kindness. He has courage. He saved my life without expecting anything in return." She looked at the crowd around her, at all the powerful people who had gathered to watch a human die. "You call his species primitive," she said, "but I have seen more nobility in his smallest act than in all your grand gestures combined. He burned his hands to save a stranger. He held me when I cried and asked for nothing. He loved me without wanting my crown or my power or my connections." Tears began flowing down her face, but her voice remained strong. "He is more worthy than anyone in this room, and I am proud to call him my spouse." Tejo stared at her with wonder. This brave, beautiful woman had just given up everything for him: her title, her family, her future. She had thrown it all away with a few words. "Liray," he whispered. She knelt beside him and took his chained hands in hers. "I told you I would find a window." The guards looked at Commander Doric, waiting for orders. But Doric could do nothing. The law was clear. The bond of eternal union was unbreakable. Tejo was now a royal consort, protected by the same laws that protected the queen herself. Queen Mavara sat back down on her throne, her face empty of expression. She had been defeated by her own traditions, by her own daughter's cleverness. "Remove his chains," she ordered quietly. The guards hesitated, then obeyed. The glowing chains fell from Teo's wrists. He stood slowly, his legs weak from kneeling. Liray stood with him, holding his arm to support him. "This is not over," the queen said coldly. "You have won this battle, daughter, but you have lost much more than you know." Liray met her mother's eyes without fear. "I have lost nothing that matters. I have gained everything I need." Standing together in the center of that magnificent court, surrounded by enemies and strangers, the human engineer and the alien princess faced the galaxy as one. The days following Liray's declaration were filled with chaos. News of what happened in the Grand Court spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every news network, every communication channel, every whispered conversation seemed to be about the same thing. A Valari princess had bound herself to a human. Queen Mavara could not execute Tejo, but she could punish her daughter in other ways. 3 days after the trial, she summoned Liray to her private chambers and delivered her sentence. "You are no longer a princess of the Valari Empire," the queen announced. Her voice was cold, but her eyes held something that might have been sorrow. "I strip you of all titles, all privileges, all claims to the throne. You are banished from Valari space forever." Liray had expected this. She had prepared herself for it during those long hours in her locked room. But hearing the words still hurt. "And my spouse?" she asked quietly. "He goes with you," the queen replied. "I never want to see either of you again." Liray nodded slowly. "I understand." She turned to leave, but her mother's voice stopped her. "Liray." She looked back. For a moment, the queen's mask cracked, and Liray saw the face of the woman who had sung her to sleep as a child, who had held her hand during thunderstorms, who had once been a mother before she became a ruler. "Why?" the queen asked softly. "Why throw away everything for this human?" Liray thought about the question. She thought about Tejo's burned hands, his gentle smile, his sad songs that made her cry. She thought about how he had looked at her like she was precious even when she wore dirty clothes in a forgotten engineering bay. "Because he makes me feel alive," she answered. "Because when I am with him, I am not a princess or a political tool or a burden to be managed. I am just Liray, and he loves just Liray." The queen closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the cold mask was back in place. "Go," she said. "Before I change my mind about letting him live." Liray left without another word. She found Tejo waiting for her outside the chamber. He was still wearing the simple clothes they had given him in prison, but his eyes were bright with worry. What happened? He asked immediately. Are you okay? What did she say? Ray took his hand and squeezed it. I am no longer a princess. We are banished from Valari space. Teho's face fell. I am sorry. This is my fault. You lost everything because of me, Ray said firmly. She cupped his face in her hands and made him look at her. I lost titles and politics and expectations I never wanted. What I gained is worth infinitely more. What did you gain? She smiled through her tears. Freedom. A future I chose for myself. And you. They left the Valari flagship that same day. A small transport ship carried them away from everything Ray had ever known, toward an uncertain future among the stars. They settled on a frontier colony called New Haven, a small planet on the edge of explored space where nobody cared about royal bloodlines or ancient traditions. It was a rough place, filled with miners, merchants, and people running from their pasts. It was perfect. Teho found work as an engineer again, fixing machines and building systems for the growing colony. Ray struggled at first. She had never cooked a meal or cleaned a room in her entire life. But she learned. She burned food, broke dishes, flooded their small apartment more than once. But she also laughed more than she ever had in the palace. And this is terrible, she said one evening, staring at a pot of burned rice. How did I fail at something so simple? Teho wrapped his arms around her from behind and kissed her cheek. It takes practice. I will teach you. You must regret marrying me, she muttered. He turned her around so she could see his face. Never. Not for a single second. Months passed. Their little apartment became a home filled with warmth and love. Teho showed Ray's culture, teaching her Korean words, cooking traditional dishes with her, playing music that made her cry and laugh. Ray shared her own knowledge, telling him stories of distant worlds. Teaching him to read Valari poetry, they became a family of two, complete in themselves. But their story had effects far beyond their small home. Across the galaxy, the tale of the human engineer and the alien princess became legendary. News programs discussed it endlessly. Writers created stories inspired by it. Young people from many species dreamed of finding love that strong, and slowly, opinions about humanity began to change. The humans were no longer just primitive newcomers. They were the species that had inspired a princess to give up her throne. They were beings capable of such love and courage that even the proudest alien would cross the galaxy for them. Human diplomats used this shift cleverly. They negotiated better trade agreements, stronger alliances, more respect in galactic councils. When other species questioned why they should trust humans, the answer was simple. Look at what one human did. Look at how he faced death with dignity. Look at how he earned the love of a princess through nothing but kindness. If humans could do that, perhaps they deserved a seat at the table after all. Years passed. Teho's hair began to turn gray at the edges. Lines appeared around his eyes from years of smiling. Ray remained young as all Valari did, but she did not mind. She cherished every moment they had together, knowing that human lives burned bright but brief. Then one day, an unexpected message arrived. Queen Mavara was dying. Ray stared at the communication for a long time. She had not spoken to her mother in years. The wounds between them had never healed. You should go, Teho said gently. She is still your mother. She banished us, Ray replied bitterly. And she is dying, Teho said. Some things are more important than old anger. So Ray returned to Valari space for the first time since her banishment. She entered the palace where she had grown up, walked through corridors filled with memories, finally reached her mother's chambers. The queen looked small in her massive bed. Her silver hair had lost its shine, and her violet eyes were dim with approaching death. But when she saw Ray, a faint smile crossed her lips. You came, the queen whispered. I came, Ray confirmed. They sat in silence for a while. There was too much to say, and not enough time to say it. Finally, the queen spoke. I watched him. You're human. I had spies send me reports for years. I wanted to find proof that I was right, that he would abandon you, or betray you, or prove himself unworthy. Lorraine's hands tightened. And what did you find? Nothing, the queen admitted. Her voice cracked with emotion. He never left your side. He never sought power or fame. He worked, he built, he loved you with everything he had.
How?
She reached out with a trembling hand. Lorraine took it. I was wrong about humans, the queen said. I was wrong about him. And I was wrong to separate you from your family. She pressed something into Lorraine's palm. It was the royal crest of the Valari Empire, made of pure crystal and ancient gold. You will always be my daughter, the queen whispered. Take this. Remember where you came from, even as you build where you are going. Tears streamed down Lorraine's face. Mother, go back to him, the queen said softly. Go back to your human. And be happy. That is all I ask. Lorraine returned to New Haven with the crest in her pocket and peace in her heart. She found Tejo waiting at their door, worry written across his aging face. How was it? He asked. She hugged him tightly, breathing in his familiar scent of machine oil and coffee. She said she was wrong about you, Lorraine whispered. She said she was wrong about humans. Does this mean I have to attend royal meetings now? Lorraine laughed through her tears. Only if you want to. He pulled back and looked at her with those kind, tired eyes she loved so much. I just want you, he said simply. She kissed him softly. That is enough. That has always been enough, and somewhere across the stars. The story of the human and the princess continued to spread, reminding everyone who heard it that the greatest strength in the universe was not weapons or empires or ancient bloodlines. It was love.